happens when somebody tries to take what you've made? We're going to talk about how to protect your assets. What if you didn't have to worry about that anymore? What if your assets were all protected?
What matters is what is going to happen when we go, and what is going to happen with our legacy.
What's going on, everybody? The last and final episode of March Money Madness starts right now. If any of you are coming in for the first time, no problem. We've recorded every single episode this month. This has been a 4-week series. We started with the fundamentals. The very first week, we went back to the fundamentals. Just like Michael Jordan, when he steps foot on the court to practice, he goes back to the fundamentals, the basic footwork, the basic dribbles. This is March Madness, but it's March Money Madness. So we went back to the basics of money. Where does your money start? Why can you do better? And why you should be the bank. Week number 2. We started talking about some hidden money, some money that you probably have that maybe you don't know you can use, money that is hidden in the walls of your house, money that is in your 401k that is sitting there for retirement, but maybe there's better use for that. So we talked about sources of money, how to use self-directed IRAs, how to use the equity in your house to take care of things like paying off debt. Because, hey, listen, I got 204 people on here, and here's one thing I know for a fact. The stats are out. The Fred reports are out. Credit card debt in the United States of America just topped 1.24. Is it a B or is it a T, folks? $1.24 trillion in credit card debt. So I know for a fact with 200 people, someone has some credit card debt. And what we did is we showed you how to get rid of that credit card debt, take and recycle and recapture the money you're giving away to those greedy credit card companies. They're not really greedy. They just charge a lot in interest. You can call it what you will. But imagine if you were able to pay yourself every penny of what you pay the credit cards. What would that do for your family? Well, I can tell you if your credit card's 25% interest, it'd be like recapturing 25%. It'd be like making 25% of your money because it's the same thing. Week number 3. Last week was awesome. We took everything we learned in week 1, everything we learned in week 2, and we showed you how to take and make your money work for you. Because, hey, listen, I know we all work really hard. Every single one of you on here, first off, thank you all for being here, okay? Not everybody is on this webinar, and I give you a ton of credit for taking the time out of your day, putting the energy in to be here, to learn something new, to get ahead, and to get ready for what's about to happen, which for all of you will be the biggest opportunity in your life. That's what that video was that I was just playing. I'll post it again. If any of you want to check that video out, I'll get it up there in a second, or Steven, you can post it. But that was application of your money, making your money work for you. We gave you a bunch of opportunities of ways your money can work for you so you don't have to work for money. All of you are going to continue to work. You're going to continue to trade hours for dollars because that's the system we're in. That's how it works. But eventually, if you really want freedom, you're going to have to start having your money work for you. Your whole life you've worked for money. Now let's flip the role, make those little green men, these little buggers right here, go to work for you instead of working for the bank, instead of working for Wall Street, instead of working for someone else. These must go to work for you, because when they go to work for you, guess what? They can work 24/7. You can't. You need to sleep. You need to eat. You need to use the bathroom. Your money does not. It can work 24/7. We covered that week 3. But today, we wrap all this together. Today, we make sure that your wealth that you build remains your wealth. Who on here in the chat can tell me the difference between someone that's rich and someone that's wealthy? Who can tell me what the difference is, rich or wealthy? Anyone? What's the difference? There's one key difference between being rich and being wealthy. What is it? Let's see if anybody gets this in the chat. I got someone saying residual income. Frank, you're awesome. Thanks for being here. Come on, what's the difference? Perspective, mindset. Okay, keep going. There we go. Who said that? Whoa, holy smokes, that just went nuts. Felix. Felix just knocked it out of the park. Wealthy individuals have figured out how not to give their money back. You see, when you're rich, you have a high probability of being poor again or being broke again. I have been on that roller coaster in my life. I have made a bunch of money, lost it all. Made a bunch of money, lost it all. That is the definition of rich. You feel rich, then you feel broke. Then you feel rich, then you feel broke. And then you start saying, what am I doing wrong? The only thing you would be doing wrong, or the only thing I did wrong, is I had not learned what the wealthy know. I had not learned how to not give the money I made back. Now, there's a lot around that. And yes, everything else you said, mindset, all of that plays into it. But today we're going to go into how to protect your assets. Because the higher up the flagpole you get, the bigger the target on your butt gets. I'm going to try to be nice and not swear a lot. I typically, you know what? Let me pause on that. When we were speaking out there, like if any of you have ever seen me speak, I tend to swear once, twice, maybe 5 times. Like I just do. And I'm, you know, it was kind of like one of those groups where there's a lot of people there that don't swear. So when I said the swear word from stage, I kind of looked around. I'm like, ooh, you didn't like that. Ooh, I see, look at their face. Like, ooh, did he just say what I think he said? Did he say ass? Whoops. But then my buddy Justin gets on stage, knocked it out of the park. He said every swear word in the book at least 5 consecutive times. So I'm like, okay, he's the bad guy and I wasn't. But anyway, back onto this. We're going to talk about how to protect your assets, how to make sure you don't give that money back, but not just give that money back to a market drop. We covered that in the prior weeks. Now, not how just to give that money back because of making dumb decisions, taking too much risk, getting greedy, all those things. But what happens when somebody tries to take what you've made? I've had this happen a lot. And listen, it's just kind of part of it. The higher up the flagpole you get, the larger the target on your butt gets. So I have been sued multiple times for the dumbest things in the world. I mean, real estate. You know, we sell a house. I'll give you a story. We sold a property, a flip to this one guy. He demoed the house and built this beautiful house because it was on great land. But then he sued me and my wife after, saying that we sold him a house that had a lot of problems. But bear in mind, he did the PINA. We fixed a bunch of stuff on the PINA for him, the property inspection report, and he closed on the property. And then he sued us 2 years later. All he was trying to do is take what we've earned. He lost. But what if you didn't have to worry about that anymore? What if your assets were all protected? But not only protected, let's go one step further. Let's talk about legacy. How many of you have children on here? I know, I bet you many of you do. And if you have children, if you're anything like me, they are your why. Your why you do everything. You want to help them. You want to put them in a better position. But you know what? There's a lot of people that are trying to take what you've made, take what you want your children to have. But not only that, there's a whole nother dynamic. Let's just say you've amassed $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, whatever your number is. You've built this wealth. And then all of a sudden, well, you get hit by a bus. I mean, listen, we never know what's going to happen. We don't know when our time is. We cannot predict when we get to go home. If that day happened, and now all of a sudden you've built $1 million, $2 million, $5 million estate, and that money transfers over to, let's just assume that your child or children are 18 years old and 21 years old. Just frame that up. One child just turned 18, the other one's 21 years old. Now, because you failed to put the proper steps in place, the proper structure in place, your estate passes on to your 18-year-old and your 21-year-old. Please tell me what happens to that $1 million estate. Go ahead, tell me what happens. Probably the same thing that happened with the Vanderbilts, right? Vanderbilts were one of the wealthiest families in history. 2 generations, their wealth was wiped out, because they did not put the structure in place that the Rockefellers and the other wealthy families did, and the structure that Brent is going to go over with you today. And not only that, folks, I want to give all of you something, because I just totally believe in giving your best stuff away for free. So there's this thing called, it's called the Legacy Builder Course. This right here, that in my hand, this is a workbook that literally gives you the blueprint for what the Rockefeller family banking system is. The language, the family constitution. We bought the rights to this from Garrett Gunderson, and we also got the book, What Would the Rockefellers Do? That's kind of what this goes with. But this book has, or this booklet has all the information. See how it's all highlighted? Why do you think it's highlighted, folks? Do you think when Brent set up my trust that I had him use this as the guiding light for what I wanted my trust language to be? Because if I die and my estate, whatever millions it is, goes to my wife and my family. I don't want them to squander it. And I know maybe they're not intentionally going to do that, but listen, like maybe they're just not good with money. Maybe they haven't learned the 6 laws of wealth and the 10 rules of prosperity. Maybe maybe my wife gets remarried. Hey, listen, after I'm gone, she should definitely get remarried. And that guy that she remarries decides he wants a yacht, decides he wants a bigger property, wants a faster car than the ones in the garage. Hey, these things can happen. But what if from the grave, I set rules and I had parameters, and those rules and parameters could not be changed? What if every time my family wants money, they have access to all the family money, okay, the family banking system's money, but every time they take it, they have to go through a process and procedure that process and procedure does one thing, and that is make sure that family banking system only gets bigger, and make sure that when they pass away, the family banking system continues to grow, replenish everything they used in their lifetime. This is the Rockefeller family banking system, the Rockefeller trust structure. I want all of you to have this. So we are going to make sure, I don't know how yet, but we're going to make sure that you all get this. We'll probably put it in the chat in just a second. But Brent's going to walk through the specifics of how to structure this, how to build this. And there's not just one way, there's multiple ways depending on where you're at, what you're doing, but you're going to build on this throughout your lifetime. Okay, this isn't just a one and done. You're going to set the structure, you're going to put the foundation there, and then you're going to keep adding on. That's how I'm doing mine. Things change. You build wealth, different things change, new children come into the mix. At least, hopefully you're trying to have more kids because, hey, we need to help this whole demographic problem. So come on, folks, get on it with the kids. We need some more kids. And as you add children, you're going to need to add them to your structure. So with that being said, I could talk all day about this, but I'm not here to talk. It is Brent Carlson's hour. So let's give him a big round of applause. And folks, listen, we are going to be watching the chat. We're going to be watching the Q&A. And if you have any questions, put them in there. Please use the Q&A and we will answer them. Brent Carlson, the show is yours. I'll give you the ability to share.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I just want to say hi to all the people that I currently work with. I recognize a lot of names, so just hi to everyone, especially my girls. I call them that I see it at most events, so hi to all the girls. Let me go ahead and pull up the screen here. So basically what I did today is I know there's a lot of attendees that I've worked with over the years, and so I wanted to be able to put together some slides for you to kind of show you some examples, some flow of a structure, also be able to provide you some new content for those that are reattending. And obviously with the number of people today, this will be the first time that you're hearing about corporate capital. So just want to give you a quick introduction. I did want you to take a picture of this screen or at least write down that phone number, if you will, because one thing that I've done with Chris since I met him in 2019, my wife and I started our company back in 2013. When we met him, we talked about the relationship, we talked about his vision. The first time I heard Chris speak, I was hooked. I believed in the concept. I just liked him as an individual. So we hit off this relationship, and what I committed to this group, this March Madness, these private events, anytime you call that number, it only rings to the 3 owners or my assistants at the company. So any questions that you have, that phone number is actually dedicated for this group, because we are going to be covering, and I saw some of the comments, LLCs and the different types of trusts you can set up. I saw someone make a comment about the irrevocable trust and kind of the Rockefeller strategy. So we're going to be covering that today. This first slide here is just, again, a little information about the company. Let me go to the next page to really share with you what we do, and then we'll just really get in the nuts and bolts. My vision back in 2013 when we started our company was take advantage of being a one-stop shop. There's so many different things, as Chris mentioned, that we need when it comes to corporate structuring, when it comes to estate planning. We all have to file our taxes every single year. So as a company, we decided to put together an organization, which I'm proud to announce. We just opened an office in St. George, Utah. So we have 2 physical locations in Nevada and in Las Vegas, and then also St. George. We do work with clients in all 50 states. We do corporate consulting, compliance. It's a big deal. And I'm going to go through a slide here of different ways where your corporate veil can be penetrated. And there's many of you that already have LLCs in place, because I know, and also because I saw the names of the people on the chat, that I know that we personally have helped form those entities, and it's important to remain in compliance. So we can help with bookkeeping, we can help with the estate planning, all the things that we're going to teach you today. So again, if you want to take a screenshot, or if the group is more than welcome to share this with you. Real quick, just want to introduce just a small portion of our team. We have grown tremendously since opening the Southern Utah office, but we have everything from corporate consultants to CPAs, enrolled agents. We have attorneys, we have bookkeepers, accountants. Again, this is just a small member of the team. I actually have 5 dogs now, so I got to update this and get all 5 dogs. Kind of like Chris's cat steals the show. Sometimes my dogs steal the show, so I got to get those, my other 4. So we have, my family and I, my wife, we have 4 boys, 5 dogs. But I just have a wonderful team, and sometimes your company is only as good as your team. So I want to bring that up. All right, let's get right into it. You know, we're talking about protecting ourselves. We're talking about, you know, what is the best way to be structured. So you spend a little time online, you can pull up some stats that are really astonishing. 4.23% of the world's population is in the US, but 66% of the world's lawyers are American lawyers. 100 million plus lawsuits are filed in the US each year. And then there's a lawsuit filed every 30 seconds on average. And I hate to say this, Stephen, because you would think it would be California, but most lawsuits are filed in California and Florida more than any other state, and Florida has the most. So when it comes to, you know, protecting ourselves, if we are doing real estate, if we are running businesses, if you are doing private lending, which I'll talk about ways that you can structure, because these policies are amazing. I've worked with this group for 6 years, done taxes for 100 of these students. I see the returns. I see them borrowing the money. I see the return on the investment. I know it works. So we want to make sure that you're structured properly, and you can do it in your own name. But as Chris mentioned, you're taking that liability by doing that. So since my event in Charlotte and since being in Sundance a few weeks ago, we have set up more LLCs for private lending. And I'm going to go over a way that you can do that, where you borrow the money, do it in an LLC, and eliminate that liability. So you're putting that brick wall between your business life and your personal life. And if we continue to operate and do our deals and our investments in our personal name, it is what it is. We're limited sometimes on our tax, you know, deductions, but we also are claiming all responsibility because it's in our name. I mean, it's natural. It's very black and white. So I want to talk, before I go through the different states that you can incorporate in, because many of you probably already have a corporation or an LLC. I guarantee more than half of you have that entity set up in the state that you live. And that is okay, because that is what you know. A lot of times you'll go online, you'll go to a local CPA or attorney. But what most people don't realize is you're free to choose any state you wish to incorporate, regardless of where you live. So since 2005 being in the industry, and since having my own company since 2013, I have set up 99.9% of my clients in either Nevada or Wyoming. Now, in some cases, for my clients that have an entity in their home state, we can set up like a holding company and give them a little bit more protection. But if we continue to operate our business, our construction business, our rental properties through an LLC that say is in Utah right here in the middle of this slide, commingling of assets, that is the #1 reason why the corporate veil gets penetrated in Utah. So this slide is a little small, so I'm just going to read it. So courts can pierce the corporate veil and hold shareholders personally liable for a company's debts or action in certain situations, primarily when business is used to commit fraud, when corporate formalities are ignored. Here's my record book right here. I show this every single time during my presentation. I know a lot of you have that alter ego, which I'm going to get to, because we're not doing what's required within our corporate documents. And for our existing clients that have the LLC, every year when you renew, we help with those meeting minutes to make sure that this corporate veil cannot be penetrated. So some of the ways that it can be penetrated is fraud or misrepresentation, failure to observe those corporate formalities. So if you're ignoring your record book each year and you're just paying the state, if you ever get that knock on that door or that slip and fall, we could have a problem. So by simply updating our records and being in compliance, then the corporate veil should uphold. Undercapitalization, commingling, again, alter ego, where you're just setting up an LLC, but you're not running it as a true business. And so what you're able to do is you're able to find states and you're able to put things in place to avoid your corporate veil being penetrated. Now, before I get into those states that you can incorporate in and that we typically recommend, I want to talk about something that should be very, very important in this day and age with Google and TikTok and everything that's out there is financial privacy. One beautiful thing about the states that we recommend, which you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, you're free to choose any state you wish to incorporate. Now, we typically will recommend Nevada or Wyoming because Nevada and Wyoming, if you go back to the slide before, when you talk about piercing the corporate veil, only 2 times since 1987 has the corporate veil been penetrated in Nevada, and that was due to fraud. So the commingling of assets, not keeping up on these corporate records, you can't pierce the corporate veil in Nevada, Wyoming, Delaware as easily, and in most cases at all, unless they're committing fraud. Now, in those states like Wyoming, for example, if you're going to go into private lending, start borrowing money against the policy, or even if you're doing real estate, I just had a guy do an investment in Texas. So we set up a Wyoming entity, and by doing so, his name did not have to be on public record. So when this entity is formed, now we have an LLC that gives us a separation for whatever investment, whatever business you're doing. And if someone Googles you, your name does not have to appear on public record. So our company will actually put corporate compliance on the articles for you. So if anyone Googles Chris Naugle or Brent Carlson, that entity is not necessarily going to come up depending on what you do with it. Yeah, and this is good. And please, every slide that I put up, feel free to take a picture because, again, going back to that number at the beginning, everyone's situation is different. And sometimes, it doesn't make sense to set up an entity. And there's not a lot of cases where it doesn't, because I tell people, if you are doing anything, and let's say you're doing a side business where you're doing some consulting on the side, to make $15,000. Well, if that consulting goes sideways and someone blames you, for bad advice or bad financial advice, you don't want to have that liability now of them being able to go after your $2 million residence or $500,000 home. So by having that entity, again, whether it's just for private lending, whether it's for property, consulting, we do recommend having it in that state because, again, you have the separation. And it's so important to me as an entrepreneur. I've done a lot of business with Chris. I'm sure he's shared with you over the years, most, if not all. I mean, there's a couple because of where he does business, but a lot of the structure that we have in place is Nevada and Wyoming. Because again, these reasons right here, the owners are not on public record. You cannot pierce the corporate veil. So going back to this page for you guys, in case you need to take a picture, let me see how that comes up. So there's the piercing the corporate veil. If you'd like to go ahead and take a picture of that as well, those are all the ways that your current structure, if you are incorporated in Virginia, or if you are incorporated in Texas, believe it or not, Hawaii, one of the most laid back, one of my favorite states to visit, a lot of liability, a lot of different ways of piercing the corporate veil. So when you set up the LLC, if you're doing it for private lending, if you have a business that you guys are currently operating and you're doing it as a sole proprietorship, please just have the consultation to go over the pros and cons, because there's a couple reasons why. There's different ways that you can be taxed, and and this slide, I'll just let it do its thing, but there's a couple ways that your LLC can be taxed. So when you form this entity, one thing that we do as a company is we do a walkthrough of this record book to make sure that you're in compliance, make sure that you have your minutes of your first meeting, the operating agreement, and everything in place. So once you have that and the bank account open, now you can do a loan to that LLC for the lending. You can use it to purchase the real estate. And we recommend, of course, any rental property to not be in your name, to be in a separate entity. Which brings me to this next slide where I want to show you where if you do have your corporation or LLC currently in place, I do want to point out at the beginning, and a lot of people don't know this because, again, they think I live in California, I have to California entity. I have clients in California right now that we set up Wyoming entities for their New York property, and we're avoiding that $800 a year franchise tax. So again, just because you live there does not mean that you need to set up in that state. Now, if you guys are already, well, before I get there, let's again go over how can you be taxed. So I have LLCs that are taxed as C corporations. I have them on a fiscal year that I'll do large transfers throughout the year because it benefits my tax situation, some of my investments. So the beautiful thing about your LLC is whether or not you have a partner, if you start exceeding a certain amount of return throughout this business, we might want to look at how it's taxed. So you can have the ability to be taxed as a C corporation. You can be taxed as an S corporation. And in many cases, depending on, again, the income and the profit at the end of the year, our clients will help them put that election in place before and really just look November, December to see, are you better off remaining a single member LLC? Does it make sense to have this entity taxed as a corporation? So now what's really cool and what gets me excited is now we have the protection. We have that brick wall between our personal life and our kids and all of these business and investments. Now, for those of you who already have an LLC in place, keep in mind that LLC, if it gets sued in Florida or Michigan or some of the states that I saw you were from, they can not only sue the entity, but they are able to pierce the corporate veil with some of those ways that I mentioned. Those were just a few. California, there's up to 26 different ways to pierce the corporate veil. So what we simply do is we will have our clients set up like a Nevada or a Wyoming holding company. And so for your current LLC that you have, there's a couple things you can do. You can convert that to the state that we're recommending, or we can simply set up a holding company. Why would I want to do that? Well, now the member of that entity that you're currently using, if you have one in your home state, now we make the member of that entity this Nevada holding company, this Wyoming holding company. So now if your entity gets sued, they can go after whatever assets, whatever's inside of that operating entity in your state. Now, when it comes down to protecting our asses and making sure we have the separation, now when they go to sue the member of the entity, the member is a Wyoming or Nevada holding entity, which again, those laws clearly indicate that you cannot pierce the corporate veil and go after those individuals personally. So for those of you who have a current entity, we can have a conversation with you about either converting that to one of those states and the pros and cons of doing so, or just simply adding a simple layer that simply is there to hold the interest. So now as an individual, we have the peace of mind that we can never be sued personally. And again, I guarantee half, if not more, are headquartered in your home state. So if we can add a holding company to that, we redo the operating agreement, we reissue the certificates to make sure now that if you do ever get that knock on that door or the letter, like Chris mentioned, we've all been sued, the more successful we get, now we have the peace of mind of knowing as an individual, I have the separation. So I wanted to show you that. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, and this, I know this has a lot of information. Hopefully you guys can see it. I'm gonna go through pretty much each section. This is what's called a series LLC. And inside of about 16 or 17 states, which I'll mention a few: Tennessee, Indiana, Illinois, Nevada, Wyoming, Texas, they recognize what's known as a series LLC. Now, there may be a handful of you who have those in place, but what a series LLC is basically you have one investment company. So you have one master series. So now when I go to set up an entity with the state, instead of me having 19 LLCs in Tennessee to separate 19 properties, I set up one master series LLC. Now, if you're fortunate to be in a state that recognizes the series LLCs, then you can get away with setting up one. Otherwise, you have to set up, in that example, 19 properties in, say, California that doesn't recognize series LLCs if you truly want to separate the entity. But in those states that I mentioned, and you can Google the rest, you can set up one LLC. And now if you look at these protected series, I always use the example of prison, which is kind of funny, but I use the cells, to separate the inmates. So this is the same thing. This investment company LLC is the prison. This is the main headquarters. But now that property that's on, down the road on Rainbow Boulevard is in Series 1. My property that I own here on Sahara and Buffalo is in Series 2. So now let's say someone comes in and slips and falls on Series 2, and I have my real estate in these separate series. They cannot go after, in this example, the other 1, 3 through 10. They can only go after the actual Series 2, where the real estate that we were holding in there. So again, I deal with a lot of you who have a handful of pieces of property, a lot of them in your name. So instead of setting up individual LLCs, which would be the best way to protect it if the state doesn't recognize series LLCs, the best alternative would be the series LLC. And you can also use that. I wanted to point out, since I set up a couple LLCs for this group last week for private lending out of Wyoming. And so another thing that we can do within the series LLCs is, if you're planning on doing private lending as you grow your cash value in your portfolio, we can have different cells within the series LLC for the private lending aspect of it as well. So before you guys go out and just set up 5, 10 LLCs after the education, or if you're thinking about setting one up, look into it or have the consultation to see if your state recognizes it, and then go over the pros and cons. Now, I do want to make sure everyone realizes, because some people get excited, well, I'm going to set up one LLC and do all this different business through it. You can't do that. It needs to be like-minded. So again, it can either be all real estate, or you can do the private lending. And then if you have, 10 different projects going on and you want to keep those separate, where you have separate bank accounts, separate verbiage, now those are in their own separate individual cells, and it's with that party, as opposed to everything underneath the umbrella of one company. So again, a lot of questions probably from that. I'll be more than happy to answer some. And then as I mentioned, between Flo, Jamie, and I, who are the founders of the company, anyone that calls that number, you're going to speak to one of us, and we're happy to answer those questions specifically to you. At the bottom here is just kind of a simpler diagram of the master LLC, where you just have a few series. Here's a building, here's a rental, here's another property, and then you guys would be the members of the LLC, or potentially a trust, which we'll get into next. All right. So moving along, one thing that I wanted to add new for the group that's been with me for a long time is talk a little bit about real estate land trusts. Again, I won't spend too much time on this, because there may not be a lot of you that have the rental properties already in place, but a lot of you do. So I get asked the question a lot, well, if I want to protect my real estate or separate it, what is the best way for me to do that? Well, if you have a mortgage, a lot of people are concerned about the due on sell clause, especially if we're locked in at 2.3. During COVID, we refinanced. We don't want to all of a sudden go back to 6-7%. So you can set up a land trust. And so in this example, let's say you have 3 properties. You can have each property a duplex, a triplex, a strip mall. You can have them in their own land trust. So now they're separated in their own vehicle. Now, these are revocable, so there's no protection in those trusts necessarily, but again, I don't want all three to be tied to just Chris Naugle or Brent Carlson, so that you can put them in their own land trust. The reason why I wanted to bring that up to the group is because land trusts are the type of living trust specifically designated for real estate ownership and management, and there's no transfer tax or due on sale clause because it's revocable. So you can set up, if you have real estate in your name currently, you've been hesitant to transfer it over because of the due on sale or the transfer tax, this land trust is specific for real estate. And again, some states don't recognize them. So depending on where you live, may have to have a consultation, but that is a good, cheap way to get it into its own specific land trust real estate vehicle. And then we have it owned by the LLC, which will give you the protection and give you the separation as an individual. So again, those of you who have real estate, those of you that are holding it in your name, we could still a lot of times transfer it to an LLC or a trust and not have a due on sale clause, because as long as they get paid monthly, that's all they care about typically. But to avoid that and to make sure you never have to worry about it down the line, then the land trusts are typically the best options for our clients. The land trust would be owned by the LLC, which here in a second, I'm going to go through the best ways for you guys to have the LLC owned.
Hey, Brent, real quick, couple questions before we run past that. You might have hit this. Number one, a couple people, Nate was asking, would it be worthwhile to convert my Utah holding company to an LLC to Wyoming? That's the first question. And there's been a bunch of questions about the series. Is it just one EIN or is it multiple EINs?
That's great questions. So and that's why some people don't set them up, because it is multiple EINs. But keep in mind, it's just like setting up 20 different LLCs. You would have 20 different EINs for that as well. So yes, you will have, let's say, 5 real estate properties. You're going to have 5 sales. So you'll have 5 EINs for those sales, and then you'll have 1 EIN for the master. So some people don't do it because of the banking, which, it doesn't frustrate me. It concerns me, right? Because there's a little bit of work, but we do want to have separate EINs, Chris, for those cells to give that separation. And then I know you just took a call, but what was that second question? Do you remember, Stephen? Maybe someone has it in the chat, but we'll just wait for a second here.
What was it, Brent? Sorry.
I was just waiting. He had asked a couple of questions that were in the chat, and I'm on the screen share. So because I'm not a tech guy, I'm afraid to go back. What's a couple of the?
Okay, here we go. So Wendy was saying, is federal BOI reporting relevant with a Nevada or Wyoming LLC?
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then let's make sure we get to those other questions about the series LLC too. But so the BOI report, which we'll talk about the next slide, is due for all companies, but there's no fines or penalties. So I'm actually telling people not to file it anymore. They've gone back and forth, and on FinCEN's website, they're still recommending that you file it, but there's no fines or penalties. But that involved all 50 states, regardless of where you were incorporated. Anyone that owned 20% or more of the company, anyone that was on the bank account, anyone that invested money, foreigners, had to be reported. But they've actually made it to where there's no fines or penalties. They can't come back on us at all. So why file it? But if you go to their website, they're still recommending it.
Okay.
And then what was that other question about this? Oh, the Utah. Yeah, I would recommend, if you have a Utah holding company, that we look at converting that to Wyoming. So now we have the Wyoming holding company, because I assume if you have a Utah one, there's others underneath it that you're managing. So by doing that, that would give you that protection of knowing that if any of those entities underneath that holding company in Utah were sued, that you would have that separation and they would not be able to come after you personally. Was there one more, Stephen?
Yeah, the last one was, so would one set up a holding LLC in Wyoming, but set up a series LLC in a state like Illinois?
I like this group. Great question. So I've done it both ways. I've had a client half and half, and I've probably literally this year, let's say, done 4 Illinois, actually in Illinois or Wyoming. It's been half and half. So I've set up a series LLC in Wyoming and foreign filed it and registered to do business in Illinois, which you can do. Or you can set up an Illinois series LLC, and as long as we have it owned and managed by that Wyoming LLC, then we'll have that protection for the individual. So we could do it both ways, but that was a great question.
Awesome. All right, that's all the
All right.
questions right now.
All right, and then we'll keep going as they come up. I'm always happy to answer them. So we addressed this real quick. I've kept this on my, presentation because they went back and forth for so many months. I'm sure a lot of us filed reports. I filed some. I didn't file all. We found out that they want you to file it, but there's no fines or penalties. There's nothing they can do. That is completely up to you. But before they canceled it, it was a $500 per day penalty. It was up to 2 years in prison. It was just bullshit. They were looking for pedophile rings, terrorists. They weren't looking at you and I. But unfortunately, to make it fair, they had to involve every single person who had a corporation or an LLC, regardless if they've had a penny go through it. If you own 20% or more and you choose to file this report, then you'll need to list that. If you ever move and your driver's license expires, passport expires, you have to refile this report. So if you guys elect to file this report, just please know that you will need to do those updates. But again, even if you don't do the updates, there's not a lot of fines or requirements. But I get asked this question every event I went to. I was just at Green Valley Ranch this weekend speaking, and a lot of people were still uncertain. So I just wanted to address that real quick. Feel free to file it. We can help you file it. You could do it on your own. It takes 15 minutes, but there's no repercussions anymore on that. All right. All right. So I talked about this, and a lot of you that have your LLC in place, we'll spend just 5 minutes here and we're going to go into the asset protection. You kind of look at some of the assets that we've been able to acquire over the years. I know Chris has had some success with some of his companies and credit. And some of you have actually, been through the program here with the company. And depending on where you're at, I would love to revisit to see if you're in a position to maybe, get some credit available, lines of credit, again, depending on what your goals are. But corporate capital, the reason why I still rock, and I almost rock the BYU Cougars hat because I'm a BYU alum for Sweet 16, but I stay with corporate capital because that's my brand. That's my baby. My wife and I started 11 years ago. We built the credit on our company. So those of you who have entities probably have a Dun & Bradstreet number, maybe have never taken time to build credit. Now, just because you build credit doesn't mean you're going to get a $50,000 or $250,000 loan. But as you start to get your brand older and older, as you start to do more with the company, start to file tax returns, there's things you can do within the entity that you set up new or that you currently have to build the credit. And then after 3 to 4 months, we do guarantee a 75 or higher paydex score. So what that does for your LLC is if you go to get a line of credit or apply for anything at all through the business, if you need it, now you can put that the business has a track record, it has a paydex score that's equivalent to like us having an 800 FICO score. So all this stuff right here, we were able to do in the name of the company. This vehicle that my wife has, $1,200 a month payment in the name of the company, didn't have to personally guarantee it. So if you guys aren't taking advantage of some of those things and you want to, then I just want to let you know that for existing clients, we will help them with this process, but we won't for outside clients, because again, I've been doing this for so long, and reputation, relationship is everything to me. And I don't want people to think that they're going to go through the program and then all of a sudden be able to buy, a $500,000 home. But if you do have some goals and we want to slowly get there and have this brand help us, then I would recommend having that conversation about that. All right, so let's jump into it, to the revocable living trust here. Go back and make sure everything comes up. I don't know if I should have to hit the button again, Chris, or you think it would match?
It says revocable living trust, so that's just good. And folks, I want you to really.
Oh, here we go. Yeah. I just have to hit the down arrow.
Yeah, pay attention to this section, because this is going to be more applicable than some of the other stuff for a lot of you, like the revocable living trust. This is like the foundation of what you'd set up. Like, my revocable living trust owns all my cars, all my accounts, my businesses are all owned by my trust. Excuse me, my house is owned by my trust. And there's very specific reasons Brent's going to explain right now So this is a really important part. One other little announcement too, I've been putting it up in the chat. We've got a bundle that we put together for March Money Madness, and that bundle gives you all of the recordings. Everybody over in the chat is asking, hey, can I get a recording? Yes, all the recordings are edited, time-stamped, and put into this bundle that we did, along with access to TV for 1 full year. Okay, plus you get the Legacy Builder course, but not just the course, because this booklet that I mentioned earlier that everybody was trying to open and they couldn't, sorry about that. We're going to email this to all of you, but there's also a course that goes into really diving into this. That course is only available with the bundle, and then you get a copy of every one of the books that I've done. So if you're interested in that, it's $197. It's a freaking steal at $197. So I'll put that link up there. But Brent, sorry to cut in. I just want to make sure that, we hit some of these things as we're going. But
no, and honestly, Chris, as long as I've known you and the success we've had with your clients, I would love for them to, to be able to take advantage of that and obviously have that education and guidance, because this is such an important topic. It's such an important thing we do. I'm 43 years old. I have 4 boys. I have 5 dogs. I own my building that I work in. I own my home. I have assets. I probably have equal to some of you, less than some of you, more, and that doesn't matter. What matters is what is going to happen when we go, and what is going to happen with our legacy. And so obviously, when we set up a revocable living trust, some of you probably already have the revocable living trust in place. And I've talked to people all the time that have the trust done, but I look them up on public record and their personal residence is still inside of the trust. And just so you know, Chris, I set aside plenty of time so we can go through the living trust, the asset protection trust, as much time as your audience needs to just make sure that they understand and any questions answered. But it's so important that with this living trust that we are proactive. I tell people we can be reactive in life in some situations, but we can't when it comes to the revocable living trust. So with your living trust, you're going to want to put and make sure it's funded. So if you already have one, you need to go to the bank. You need to talk to the banker and let them know that at the time of death, transfer of death, I want my bank account going to my revocable living trust, or whatever trust for that matter. Because if you don't, that's going to go through probate. Now, I'm going to give a lot of examples today because I'm very big on examples, because I told my wife the other night, I'm tired of recommending the living trust or the asset protection trust. I want to tell people why it makes sense for them not to do it, because there's really not a lot of reasons, unless you financially can't afford that, which I totally get. Otherwise, it makes sense to be proactive, because if not, we're putting all this pressure and everything back onto our heirs. So not only do they have to go through the grieving process, but now they have to go through probate. And I have 2 women, elderly women right now. One of them is waiting on $440,000 from US Bank. It's been 8 months. One is waiting on $98,000 from Wells Fargo. Their husbands passed away and they did not have their living trust in place. And so now they have to wait for this process to play out. And of course, they had to hire an attorney. And the attorney that they had to hire literally was 4 times as much as it would have cost a living trust to be set up today. Not to mention 20 years ago, you could have set one up for hundreds of dollars, right? So everything's relevant. But inside your living trust, there's some components I want to touch on. You're going to have your health care, which to me is super important. So inside your health care, you're going to have your decisions of what you want to have happen to you. Now, do you want to be in a coma and fight for your life? Do you want to be a vegetable? I put in my trust that I did not want to be a vegetable. Everyone has their own, beliefs and their own things they want to do with themselves. But I put in their language about mine and my wife's health, what we want done with our, bodies, buried. We put on there who can make those healthcare decisions, which is my parents. And then after that, my oldest son, because I don't feel like I'm going anywhere soon. He should be mature enough. But then we also have the power of attorney. So that power of attorney inside this revocable living trust is going to give you the ability to have someone sign on your behalf. So again, last year I had a girl that was beaten into a coma by her boyfriend. Terrible situation. She had her living trust done that we did. Her friend Vanessa was able to be the power of attorney. So she was able to do her renewals. She was able to do her tax returns. and basically keep everything going until she came back. So this document, again, is just one of those things that if now we don't have a sound mind, we're not in a position, or we pass away, all the assets that you currently have in your name are going to go through probate court. And that probate process, like I said, is average between 6 and 18 months. And when my cousin had his parents pass away last year, they only owned a home, and they didn't have any businesses. They didn't have any policy. They didn't have anything. And the cheapest retainer he could find was a $10,000 retainer to represent this one property that had 150,000 in equity. Well, long story short, he gives the 10,000, he loses 7,500 of the retainer. They foreclose on the property, and this kid that lives paycheck to paycheck missed out on an opportunity, and it was his fault because of the delay, and it was also his parents' fault for just not being proactive. So now we want to put our home in there. We want to put our bank account. We want to put our business interests in there somehow, or make sure it flows to the revocable living trust to make sure it goes and stays within the family. Now, inside of this trust, you can have what's called the family bank dynasty language. So now, if you want this trust to live on for generation and generation, because once you pass away, the grantors, it becomes irrevocable. So we can do it either inside of this trust, or also talk about an asset protection trust, because the asset protection trust has a little different protection. But inside this revocable living trust, you could have the family bank language. So some clients that we work with in this group have it to where when they pass away, their death benefit receives everything. Then we have others where they want the policy to live on, forever and generation. And I had a 36-year-old kid that just set up a policy, I believe, with this group. And the reason he did it, he goes, I know I'm not going to benefit from it. He goes, but it has to start somewhere. We've been paycheck to paycheck my whole life. I'm going to start it now. My grandkids will benefit from the cash value. So we set up this trust. So inside that trust, we have that this will live on forever for as long as possible, whatever the terms are. And then the kids are able, or the beneficiaries are able to receive so much from the trust each year. And then so much would get allocated back into the policy, or whatever your wishes are. Now that goes back to Chris's concern, which is another example I typically use. When I was up at BYU, an 18-year-old came across $700,000. It was gone the next year. All of a sudden, he had 20 friends. Everyone wanted to hang out, smoke, drink. He's in college. All of a sudden, he's the guy paying for everything. Completely blew through that money. So inside of my trust, I have these terms in there to make sure that there's only so much that is able to be accessed and, actually where it can be spent on. Now, you'll notice though, and you can change your beneficiaries anytime. You have your power of attorney, healthcare. Now, the only problem that with the revocable living trust is there's really actually no asset protection inside of a living trust because it's revocable. So what that means is everything that's inside of the revocable living trust while we're alive can actually be taken from us. So the way to avoid that is there is a trust in a few states, and again, it's the same culprits. It's the Nevada, the Wyoming, the Delawares, the ones that have the strongest corporate veils that offer you to set up these trusts, which give you some very, very unique protection. So again, a living trust is a must for you anyway. I tell everyone, and most of Chris's clients, most of this group, we do end up incorporating both trusts. But the living trust is important because a lot of times there's a mortgage on your personal residence. So it's easier to put in the living trust. You can change the beneficiary. So if you ever want to disinherit, a child or a grandchild, which I've had happen many times in my career, you can do that. And so we want to make sure that piece is there. But again, because there's no protection, it will bring me to the asset protection trust next. But this is the example as far as the choice is easy when it comes to setting up a living trust. Now, some of you might, and the reason I put the slide on here, some of you might only have a will in place. I want to point out that if you only have a will in place, that will go through probate. So the public disclosure of your assets, maximum emotional impact on the family, court appointing guardians and conservatives, expensive probate fees, maximum estate taxes, easily contested. So literally I could go in and say, oh, I gave Chris Naugle $200,000 a week before he died. And the judge has to figure out if that's right or wrong, right? Because they don't know. There's no living trust. I'm going to put a lien or contest the, the estate because I had a will. Well, by having a living trust, you'll notice there's no attorneys, there's no court control, no probate, no guardians. So if you have a living trust, call me, go to your attorney, say, I need my living trust with the will in it. I can't have my will by itself. Your will have your beneficiaries receive everything, which is super important, but they're still paying that thousands of dollars on the left there because your will go through probate, and that is just the law. But a living trust will not go through probate, and that has your will inside of it. So again, congratulations if you have the will. Now let's look at putting the power of attorney and healthcare in place to make it a living trust to avoid the probate process. Okay. Did we have any questions on that, Steve, before I go to the asset protection trust? We good?
I'm kind of going through hitting questions too. I know you are too, Steve, and we're just rapidly typing. But one thing that would be really helpful, folks, before we move on, if you do have questions, can I ask a huge favor? Can you put them in the Q&A? My fingers are getting a bit sore here because the chat is just wild. So if you could just put all your questions in the Q&A, then we'll answer them there, or we'll have Brent answer them live.
Yeah, because once I'm done sharing the screen, I'm sure you can walk me through how to see that again. So, all right.
The other thing, real fast, hey, Brent, just real fast before you move forward too. I have a lot of people messaging me right now, like asking about the recording for this. So I just wanted to be clear, so this is recorded. You are going to be able to watch it. It's exclusive though for MSTV members. So what we did is we took this entire March Money Madness series that we've been doing. This is the 4th week of the March Money Madness series. As you guys know, it's a March Madness basketball final. Sweet 16 starts tomorrow night. So might have you go put some bets in for me in Vegas, Brent. Different story. We'll talk about that later. But the bottom line though is
I got the app. Just let me know.
we're gonna get the recordings in here. And in the MSTV membership, it's got all kinds of cool stuff in there. I'll talk more about that, but I just want everyone to know if you want the recordings, go sign up for it, and we'll get them in there for you guys. Go ahead, Brent.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you. All right, so let's talk about this asset protection trust. Again, I'm going to kind of just go through it and then we'll talk. So this asset protection trust, it protects your assets. It separates you from litigation and creditors. Now that 2 years means that this trust, anything that's put inside of there after 2 years, it's protected from creditors, litigation, bankruptcy. You're protected. But again, if we were to get in a car accident or getting divorced and we want to hide assets, like I had a guy call me in Florida, hit a girl on a bike, he's panicking. He had all this in place, so he was fine. But if he wouldn't have, he wouldn't have been able to do anything because, again, it's like a living trust. You have to be proactive. But if we're proactive, like I set up mine before I had a lot of my assets in place because this is what I do for a living. I understand. I wanted to have it there as a vehicle. So if I close on something, it's just directly inside the appropriate vehicle instead of my name and then having to assign it or do a quick claim deed. So inside this asset protection trust, you can put, businesses, you can put brokerage account, your stock. If you have guns that you want to protect, take out of your name, literally protect and separate. If there's cash, that obviously your cash should be going into policies and different investments. But let's say you're the type of person that wants to make sure 100 grand is always protected. You could put that inside of this trust. And after 2 years, literally everything would be protected. Art, trademarks, anything really that you want to protect while you're alive. So depending on some of my businesses, Chris mentioned, like issuing the certificates. I do have some of the certificates of my business issued to the asset protection trust because my living trust is the beneficiary. And then I have some in my living trust. Again, it just depends. So we like to look at that, not take a cookie cutter approach and just say, set up this, assign everything there. But there's a lot of times where that asset protection trust, for those of you that have that target on your back, that are starting to build, a good little nest egg. We live in a country where lottery, lawsuits, I always say the 3 L's, lottery, lawsuits, one other. That's the fastest way to get rich. And when we structure ourselves and have these things in place, no one can touch us. So this literally is the best bulletproof trust that you could put in place to have the best of both worlds. So you don't have to pay trust taxes. So it's a grantor trust. but it still gives you the flexibility. So it's irrevocable, but it has revocable privileges. So what that means is you can put anything inside of this trust. So land is an example. I had land in mind. I pulled it out during COVID, refinanced it, and then put it back in. So when I put it back in is when the 2-year window starts over. So if you do have businesses or if you do have assets, you could potentially put the real estate directly inside the trust. You could have it owned by an LLC that's owned by this trust. So now if someone ever sues Brent Carlson personally, I might not own the corporate shares of this multi-million-dollar company. Well, I don't own the corporate shares. They're inside of my trust. So now I don't have to list that I own that asset. So again, it's just for access protection purposes. Now, if I have a true lawsuit, obviously I'm structured properly. I have good insurance. I'm not worried about a thing. But by doing this and having these pieces in place, you're going to avoid those ambulance chasers, those people that have the target on Chris's back and others' back, because they know when they sit down with an attorney who knows anything about structuring, especially Nevada, Wyoming, or Delaware law, they know that once that 2 years comes and goes, they can't touch anything in there. So you can even put your IBC policies in there. So again, if you want the IBC policy in there, if you want to make it the beneficiary, we can have the same language in this trust where we have the family bank, have it live on for generation and generation, the Rockefeller. We can actually do that. I forget the gentleman's name, but we can actually do that in either trust. So again, depending on what your goals are and what your concerns are, that living trust will give you that language to make sure that you have that Rockefeller strategy and that this generational wealth continues to grow and continue to build. But I am very big on the asset protection trust. I do think that there's a few assets that all of you have where it makes sense to incorporate both pieces. So what the grantor of that trust would be you or you and your spouse. And then my attorney is the distribution trustee. So you guys want separation in order to really do this the right way, like the Rockefellers. So if you want to transfer assets or borrow against something in the trust, you contact the attorney, send him an email, a phone call. I want to sell my property on Rainbow Boulevard. He sends an email, says, okay. So he's a distribution trustee, which basically is there to protect you. Because if you're the grantor, you're transferring the assets and you're the beneficiary, that looks funny. So our attorney will be the distribution trustee, and we've never said no in 20 years, 11 years of my own firm. Our job is not to say no and tell you can't transfer assets. To be candid, if you wanted to transfer one out to satisfy a creditor, we would let you. We would tell you that you're foolish, that you don't need to, but we would allow you to do that because, again, it's your trust. We're just here to make your life easy and make sure you're doing things properly. But this specific trust, again, is very unique, and I think you'll find that you will use it throughout your life. Now, one thing I want to touch on briefly as we get older. Now, a lot of you have heard put your personal residence inside of your living trust, right? Which mine's inside my living trust because I still have a mortgage on mine. Now, for those of you getting older, if you don't have a mortgage on your property, you can actually put your personal residence inside of this irrevocable asset protection trust as well. Now, why is that big? After 5 years, anything inside of here, especially your residence, is protected from the state. So the state of New York, the state of California, the state of Nevada. So if you get sick and all of a sudden you owe Cali $1 million and your house is worth 700, you probably want that going to your kids. You don't want that going to California. So if we had that in our living trust, they can actually go after that property. But if we have it in this irrevocable asset protection trust, after a 5-year look back period, you're protected from like the Medicaid, the state, all of that. So as you guys continue to evolve with our company and we get to, we have that relationship every year, we're all getting older, you pay off a property, we might want to look at putting some of those assets inside of this trust because, again, they'll be protected from the state and, more importantly, those ambulance chasers, those people that are going after us. So this trust can hold anything from trademarks to brokerage accounts, your policies, your business interest. Truly, if you want to make it black and white and simple, just think about what do I have out there that I want to protect: real estate, business interests, everything. That's where I would recommend. Now, if we're not worried about the asset protection, then again, going back to the revocable living trust, then we're able to just put everything inside of here. We're able to issue our business interest, our policies, and still have that family bank language. So to me, the most important thing is make sure you have the living trust as the starting point for those key assets, the bank accounts, the personal residence. And then as you grow the relationship, I tell people a lot of times we do them at the same time. But if they're not sure if both pieces make sense, then I usually say, okay, well, what is absolutely mandatory? And usually it's the living trust. So with our process, we give our clients a questionnaire, and it's a very simple questionnaire where they fill out like the grantor's information, beneficiary information, who's going to be the successor trustee, and then my attorney will go through the draft with you and sit down with you and your spouse, or you individually, go through the children. I saw a lot of you had 2, 3, 5 kids. How do you want to split that up? Do you want it to, like, my partner actually has a lot of money, but his death benefit, he's given everything when he dies. I disagree with that. Everyone's different. So again, if you want to control that language, avoid these fees, avoid court, avoid attorneys who are just nasty in this arena. Your family has to grieve enough. If you have a living trust, kudos. If it needs to be updated, give us a call. We could take a look at that. We've done some things. For the most part, though, you don't have to update a trust. I tell people that. I get that question a lot. Oh, I did it 20 years ago. Awesome. If your beneficiaries are the same and you got your business and your property in there, cool. If you don't, get to the bank, get to those places, and make sure that you transfer those things in there accordingly, because that trust is not worth the paper it's written on if you actually still have the title of those assets in your name. And I know some of you, I guarantee some of you still have some of these assets in your name that have a trust. And if you need a letter kind of like explaining how to transfer some of those assets, we even have things like that. And I'm happy to send something like that as a courtesy as far as transferring assets. Obviously, if you need to set up a trust, we can have that conversation. But that is the difference between the revocable living trust and the asset protection trust. But both of those will accomplish the goal of what Chris's team teaches: infinite banking, becoming just a success story, generation after generation. Both of those trusts will suffice. We just want to know what your goals are, but those are the difference between those two there. Okay. Did I have any questions on that, Chris, at all, or we good?
You have so many questions. I don't even know where to start.
Oh,
So you let me know when you're ready to start doing questions, because there
yeah,
is
well, because I was just looking,
a bunch.
like I said,
There's a bunch.
so some of this I've already talked about as far as, let me just real quick. So it protects you from creditors by transferring the assets to the trust. Owners create a legal barrier, making it difficult. Irrevocable nature. So they're irrevocable, mean answers trusts into the trust cannot be easily retrieved by the grantor, which is a good thing. They can be retrieved, but not easily. That's why we have the distribution trustee. You have the 2-year statutes. You and your spouse are the beneficiary. Your kids are the beneficiary. And then the other beneficiary we make is the revocable living trust, because that is one trust that you can change beneficiaries at any time. And I have a guy, Del Dill, he cracks me up. He's like 91, worth 20 million. He just keeps disinheriting kids, grandkids. I'm like, are you okay? He is. And he's just tired of the way they're living. So you can make changes. So we will make the living trust the beneficiary. So now if something happens to your children and you need to change the beneficiaries in your living trust, you can do so, because that asset protection trust, everything would flow down to that. But I think I'm ready for questions, Chris. There's some Q&A right there. So
All right, Stephen, you want to start some of the questions here? I'm finishing up Angelina's question here, which I'd like to get into this one a little bit.
Yeah. Let me see. Just start at the top. Is that good?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, MJ.
Okay, cool. So MJ said, as far as building corporate credit, can you purchase an aged corporation to expedite the process much faster?
Oh man, I love that question. And I just like to be very transparent. So we do have shelf corporations. Met someone at an event this weekend. Some companies will tell you that, and there may be some companies out there that know something different, but no, because a lot of times it's going to go off of, tax returns and the financials. And, if you're looking for a government contract, the shelf corporation can help you, because sometimes they require 2 years of age, but it really won't benefit you within my organization. So I wouldn't have people invest in that. We do have shelf corps, and some people I've talked to buy shelf corps. They say they get these crazy lines of credit and then close them out. Again, we're just more of, we want to build the brand, make sure the credit's built properly. And the shelf corp's not going to put you in any better or worse position, because they're still going to look from 2020 that there was no tax return. And so as far as funding, it's probably not going to help you to be transparent.
Okay.
But you know what? I will tell you right now, you call the wrong company, they're going to sell you a $5,000 shelf corp and credit, and they're going to tell you that they're going to get you a line of credit. And I just want you to be careful with that. If you are looking into that, make those calls, just do your research, because I used to do this a lot. I've been doing this since 2005. My company's called Corporate Capital because we build credit. We never got away from that. And it's just always been our baby. But that's why I take the approach I do, where expectations need to be in line. And, if you call the wrong company, you'll get a sales rep, not an owner like me, that will tell you, oh yeah, Shelf Corp, you get a $500,000 line of credit, and then you'll be fighting like heck to get your money back. So just be careful, but we can definitely help you. The Shelf Corp gives you a little bit credibility. It could expedite the process, but it's not going to drastically change things, just to be fair. Okay.
All right. Wendy said, do you specialize in trusts for disabled children?
Yeah, we have quite a few clients that we've set up those specific type of trusts. And what I typically do for you is we'll schedule a consultation. A lot of times I'll do the consultations. I think a lot of you will find between Jamie, Flo, and I, but I try to talk to as many of you as I can. So I'll do the initial consultation, kind of make sure we're the right fit, see where we're going to start. And then for someone like that, I would actually get Lenny, Steve, or Blake, one of the attorneys, on the call and have them talk to her specifically to go over that specific situation. But yes, we do.
All right. About cost for a living trust.
So that it just depends on living trust. But, I think for the most part with this group, we've been around, depending on the assets, around 3,500 to $4,000. We try to stay consistent. There are some times where there's a lot of assets. There may be times where we've gone a little less. So it's, I always hate answering that question, because we try to be fair. Like, I am a type of owner that, like, for example, I have a client that does $90 million on YouTube. They're 33 years old. I still charge them $997 to do their tax return. And I guarantee other companies would charge them 10 grand. And these knucklehead kids, they would pay me 20 grand cash. They bring cash in. They're just like that. They're driving Teslas and Ferraris but we're not that type of company. So, we want to look at what you have. And then, like I said, we just have a small range. I haven't raised my pricing of taxes, of setting up trusts, of setting up an LLC since I opened my doors in 2013. So literally, people that incorporated with me 5 years ago, if they were to set up a new entity, they would see today that our pricing is still the same, but it's roughly around there. And it could be a little less if you just have one personal residence. But one thing I want to point out, since I answered that question, because sometimes that hesitates people from calling, because they just focus on the price point, or maybe they talk to their spouse and say it's this much. Keep in mind, we don't bill by the hour. So if you have questions, you call me. I have 3 assistants. We have 3 attorneys. We want to be here for you. So that's part of the service as well.
And Brent, let me hit on that. There's somebody that I have lots of attorneys that I work with. So if you use an attorney, which almost every attorney could set up your trust for you, they're going to bill by the hour in most cases. And like, if you were talking about the trust that I put together, which was very intricate, very much using the stuff from the Legacy Builder course and the Legacy Builder workbook, like, mine was complicated. Like, all that stuff that Brent was talking about, where, like, if I die, I want all these rules in place so that my wife or children can't just squander the money, that there's protections to make sure that it goes multiple generations. Like, you write it and then you rewrite it and then you add things. Like, if you were doing it hourly, like, you're over 10 grand. There's no way around that. So with Brent's system and how they do it with the flat fee, that's definitely the best path to go.
Yeah, and we're and I'll tell you the reason we do that. And I'm a very transparent person, because we're a full service incorporating firm and help with the LLCs and help with the taxes and help with the trusts. Obviously, a lot of you on this event are tax clients of ours that have been for many years. And that is what I'm really like. That's the relationship, really helping you, making sure you're structured properly, putting as much money back in your pocket. And so that's why we don't like to nickel and dime you. We don't want you to be hesitant to send an email or call. If you have grandchildren, hey, call, share the good news, and let's get them added, to the trust. And a lot of times, again, for those of you who have it, once you get it done, you put it on your shelf. A lot of times you don't look at it. And so it all plays itself out. But I tell my clients, we treat things like a gym membership. A year and a half ago, you guys could tell I never went. Now I go every day. So I want my clients to use my company kind of as a gym membership. If you have questions, call, email us. We won't bill you by the hour. Sometimes it may take 24 hours to get back to you, but not even that. We really have a good system. With our accounting clients, we put you in teams of 2. So if you are even taxes, right now we're in the middle of tax season, and I'm sure you guys talked about this, but if you haven't met that deadline, we just opened that office in Utah. We actually do have the capacity of taking on new tax clients. So if anyone out there needs help, or you're kind of scrambling last minute, that's something that we could potentially help you with. Obviously the trust and the estate planning, but there's no commitment. One thing that I is very busy, especially this time of year. I think you guys will appreciate my approach when we set up this consultation. I'll have a consultation with you, and a lot of people could probably put this in the comments that once I follow up, like I give you a proposal, say this is what I recommend, and then I'm not going to chase you down, use car salesman. I just want to put in place a structure, provide the value that Chris needs for this group to say, this is what you need for your structure, for your family, put the ball in your court. And then once that ball's in your court, once we start getting these forms back, we start getting everything in place. And once your LLC is formed, and if you have an existing LLC, I am more than happy to set up a call where I go through the record book and make sure that you have your operating agreement, you have your corporate seal, you have these stock certificates issued, filled out. I guarantee most of you, or some of you don't have that done. So if you have an existing LLC, one commitment I made to Chris is we're happy to review that, look it up with the state that you're in, and just tell you if we think that you're in compliance. And if that's all you need from this, 4 weeks, we are happy to provide that to you, whether it's a simple question or it's just everything that we went over today. And again, I know there's a lot of questions, and we'll answer as many as we can today. And then I would look forward to speaking with you guys individually as well.
Cool. What's the next one, Stephen?
All right. And we got Jay saying, how much is setting up a revocable living trust? Okay, we hit that.
Got that.
Lisa said, is a living trust good something we should always have, or only if we have a business? I mean, like just everyday people.
Oh, that's a great
Great
question. So that's a great question. And I get this question a lot. If you have anything in your name, and even if you have a bank account, let's say that has, $10,000 in it, there's a couple things you can do. If you really have limited assets like that, you can go to the bank and you can put so-and-so as the transfer of death, time of death, or you can put them on your bank account. But if you have a home, if you have a vehicle, if you have jewelry that you want, to go to certain kids or grandkids, and you don't want any infighting, all of that stuff is listed in your living trust. And so for a reasonable fee, what I feel is a reasonable fee that I've charged 11 years, you're able to put that in place and, just avoid the probate process. So I would recommend, having the living trust for that reason. And then I kind of lost my train of thought, Stephen. What was the exact question?
Just whether, everybody should have.
Oh yeah. So, and again, if you do pass away, going to the black and white of it all, if you pass away, anything that is in your name will go through probate. So, and that probate process takes time. And of course, you do have to have an attorney who represents you in that probate process. And so again, if it's 10,000, 20,000, you got to look at it like, okay, do I spend a few thousand to get a trust to protect what I have and to avoid this? Or do I put this on my kids where they have to wait the probate process, hire an attorney, for more than what it would have to set up a trust? And so I think everyone should have one. But if you truly don't own any assets and you truly don't have any kids or husband, then no, then you probably don't need one,
Yeah. All right, awesome. I know we're getting about to the top of the hour here where we typically wrap up, so we can keep going with these questions. There's a whole bunch of them on here. I just wanted to mention one more time, though, we are putting Brent's contact information over in the comments, so you guys can call direct. The 855 number is exclusive for money school students. You can also schedule a call on there, and all of this recording, as well as the previous 3 weeks of March Money Madness series, as well as dozens and dozens of videos and content exclusive for MSTV, are all included in here. The Legacy Builder course, but it's an annual membership, $197 special to get all the bonuses, all the books, the Legacy Wealth Builder course. We do an exclusive MSTV members only webinar every week on Thursdays, and that's going to actually start being a 3 times a week exclusive webinar. So join now before the price goes up, anything like that. Get yourselves in. So much financial education in there. Very, very powerful stuff for what's going on in the economy right now and everything else. So
Well, I got to jump in on that, Stephen. So a couple things. It's tax deductible. All right. You write that sucker
Oh,
off.
yeah.
Yeah.
There we
Write
go.
that sucker off and take advantage of what they're saying. And I hope they don't mind me saying this. They didn't ask me to do this, but I will tell everyone the reason why I'm still here and have this partnership with Chris is because we do hundreds of your tax returns. We see the return. We see this being such a formidable group. And that is why I've invested my time. I quit coaching baseball after 12 years just to invest and to be able to travel and to attend with this group, because I'll be in Dallas in May. And so I will tell you from my experience as a business owner, entrepreneur, an accounting company, someone that's very close to my money and very careful, this is a very, very influential group. I could tell you that Chris and Stephen genuinely care about you. I've had those partnerships out there where people, it's all about them and their platform and coming to their events. They're there for you. And our clients have had nothing but positive things to say. And I hope it's okay, gentlemen, sharing that. But after 6 years, I've never publicly said that on an event. But because we have so many happy customers, if people are looking for this guidance, obviously you guys are offering, it sounds like a really good promotion. And I just wanted to point out as the accountant guy that would be tax deductible for you guys. All right.
All right.
Awesome, man. I love it.
All right.
Love it, love it, love it. We call it the
Well, thank you guys. And I look forward to speaking with everyone. I know there's a lot of questions. So I do have a few calendar appointments today. I do have 3 assistants here at the office just to make sure my clients are always taken care of. That number does ring to Taylor, Kaylee, and Jocelyn, which are the assistants, and then Flo and Jamie, which are the co-founders of Corporate Capital. And even if it's the assistants that answer, it would be either me, Jamie, or Flo, the principals, that would do that one-on-one consultation. Hopefully we could do it live. If not, we can schedule something. But as always, Stephen and Chris, I appreciate the opportunity. I wanted to make sure that we had some new information for your existing group that's just been a phenomenal following. And hello to all the new attendees. Look forward to working with you and speaking with you soon.
All right. Let's go rapid fire through these questions.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hit a couple. I was trying to respond myself.
Yeah, I've been trying to as well.
It says, why are we using a revocable versus an irrevocable trust or irrevocable?
So the revocable is just everything in there can be taken from you. So if you have a revocable living trust, again, if that's all you have, any of those assets while you're alive, if you don't have insurance, so let's say even your personal residence, let's say you have homestead and you have insurance and it goes over and above that, you could potentially lose your personal residence if it's not homestead. But if it's in an irrevocable trust, you lose some of the tax benefits. So that's why a lot of times we have to have the living trust for the mortgage and things like that. But then once that is paid off, there's more protection in an irrevocable trust. So just really keep it that simple. The irrevocable trust, no one can penetrate and take after 2 years. And the revocable trust is always susceptible to lawsuits. I've been doing this 20 years. I haven't had a lot of clients lose their assets. Their insurance usually works, their structure usually works, but that's the difference.
Oh. A couple people were asking about the 2-year thing. Why 2 years or only 2 years, or what does the 2 years mean on asset protection trust side?
That's a great question. The reason they make you wait the 2 years is because of the example I mentioned. If you had someone who got in an accident or was going to be separating and they knew this was going to happen, if we transferred our assets the next day, that would be like a fraudulent transfer. But as long as we're being proactive, the statutes in different states have given us vehicles to protect ourselves. But the only way we can protect ourselves is by having a trust set up and giving enough time for the public, like creditors and people, to go after that trust and say, okay, this person owes me money, because after 2 years, anything inside of there is protected.
Okay.
And I might need to talk to that individual, directly, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Can a Canadian set up an LLC in Nevada for USA real estate?
I love it. I have probably 100 Canadian clients that we work with. We do a lot. It's funny. Our Canadian clients are either in Florida or Nevada when it comes to their property. Believe it or not, a lot of Florida. But we set up the LLC. We can help with the taxes, the FBAR, anything that needs to be done on a state level for the entity, for the taxes, for the state. And then also you should probably have a living trust here as well for whatever assets, real estate that you end up acquiring. That LLC could be owned by your trust, and then it would avoid any type of probate process here in town.
All right. Let's see. Should they put a nonprofit into the trust?
No, I wouldn't put the nonprofit into the trust, because the nonprofit is a standalone, has its board, has its the protection. I guess it depends what they're using it for, but I would say no. And to be candid, I would probably lean on my attorney to answer that question directly, because I think that's the first time I've been asked that in my 20 years. Because usually the nonprofit stays within the board and its own standalone entity.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily owned by anyone. It's a nonprofit as far as most nonprofits. So I guess I'd have to talk to him.
Cool. Let's see. What state is the best for LLCs and corps? Nevada, Wyoming, Delaware?
So if you're going, I keep this simple. If you're going publicly traded, Delaware for sure. If you're doing anything private, and again, the private lending entities that we've set up have both been Wyoming for this group. Those two states are the best. There's no state tax. There's no corporate tax. So you're not paying any taxes in that state. All you're doing is a simple filing every year to set it up. And then in some cases, we'll register you to do business in Texas or Florida or where you live. So it's still like having a company registered in your home state, but the difference is it's Wyoming jurisdiction. So when you look it up in Florida, it will show a Wyoming entity legally registered to do business in Florida. And that's typically what we will do. And then that will give you the ability to legally do business in that state. But again, if you're just doing private lending, a lot of times we don't have to register you in your home state. You could just keep everything headquartered in Wyoming. We help you with the address. We help you open up the bank account, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. So you do a DBA for that state?
Yeah, we do DBAs in all states. We can help with DBAs for any entity. Yeah, and you can have as many DBAs as you want underneath your company. Like I have a DBA, CCI, accounting, and tax, because obviously corporate capital is my baby. A lot of people think we're a lender. We're more of a accounting, estate planning, corporate structuring company. So that's why we have that DBA. But yeah, you can put that directly underneath it.
Okay, cool. And then is the asset protection trust and the irrevocable trust, is that the same type of trust, or are those two?
It is. It is. As a matter of fact, what I can do for you and your group, Stephen, I can email you a document that has a breakdown of the difference between the revocable trust and the irrevocable trust. And if you'd like to share with your group, I'm down to send it to you. It's like 3 pages. They could read it over, kind of get an idea, and then that would give them a little bit more education prior to making that call if they would like.
Yeah, that'd be great. Very cool.
Yeah, I won't do it now because I don't want to screw anything up, but I'll do that at the end for you.
All right, perfect. How do you avoid an $800 California FTB fee for a Wyoming holding company?
Just don't, it won't be registered to do business in the state. So it's not doing business there. So we don't register it there. Now some CPAs will, everyone's different, but with our clients, if it's truly not doing business there, then we won't register it and file that. If he pays himself anything from that entity, obviously that would go on his California tax return, but we would avoid. That's the whole reason of having that holding company there.
Okay, cool. Is New Mexico one of the new places to do corp filings?
Yeah, New Mexico. I've had a New Mexico entity for 15 years, which one of the entities we actually use on our Wyoming filings for corporate compliance, because the renewals are very inexpensive. But their state, their case law has not been as proven as Nevada. Wyoming started changing some of their case law 2009-10, so we felt comfortable. New Mexico is starting to pick up momentum. We haven't started doing as many there yet, but I did do 5 of them last week. So New Mexico is picking up a little momentum. We still recommend Nevada, Wyoming.
How about North Dakota?
Yeah, we don't do a lot in North Dakota. I do a lot in Montana when it comes to if you guys have vehicles or trucks or anything like that. I have a contact in Montana that can help set up a Montana LLC, help you register it with the DMV, and then avoid paying, the sales tax in your home state. So depending on what you guys do, if you're getting new vehicles, that might be worth a conversation because
that's definitely worth a conversation. I have 5 vehicles all registered with that person, with her. She is awesome. She is not expensive. And Brent, I bet you any money that contact you gave me with her probably saved me $26,000 in sales tax.
Yeah, and you're right. I can't believe how little she charges for what she does.
Don't tell her. Don't tell her.
No, I won't. She's so great. But that's another option for you. So Montana, if you have vehicles, you just register it there. There's no sales tag. I mean, it saves you a lot of money. So I have a lot of my truckers. I have a lot of my clients in construction. And so again, there's a lot of things to talk about, whether it's just personal taxes and things you can do. Maybe borrowing money, pulling money out of a self-directed IRA, what are my ramifications? Do I need guidance on that? That's what we do. We help from basically start to finish. So whether you're established or you're brand new, and I love the comments earlier, I wrote it down, we're hungry. It sounds like there's some hungry people in this group, and that's what we like to work with. And we just want to make sure that infrastructure is set up properly. So as you do these things and as you do your investments and advance your portfolio, that you're protected. And more importantly, all this time, effort, and money that you're putting in just automatically goes back to the family and doesn't get 3, 4, sometimes 10 times more expensive than just not being proactive. And the only reason people don't do it is they think it's a negative thought. Obviously, no one likes to think about death. Or they think I'm just too busy. Well, imagine how busy the person's going to be or your spouse is going to be if you pass away and leave all this with them and there's no trust. It's a lot messier, a lot worse. And so
I've dealt with that a bunch. That it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. And probate's honestly like, I don't know, take a pencil and jam it in your eye. It's about the same thing as going through probate. I've gone through it several times with family members, and it's a terrible feeling.
Well, and the infighting too. Like I've seen just so much.
Well, that's the big thing, because there's always infighting. Always.
Well, because then you have, your sister who married a new guy that you don't have much relationship with, who wants to throw his weight around, and it's not the siblings anymore, it's spouses. And but now you have a document that says, knock this shit off. This is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to get. Like my 4 boys, 2 of which I adopted, they're getting 25% of my estate, even though they're not my blood, they're my last name. So I'm giving them 25%. But that probably wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have adopted them and had this trust. So that's why it's so important to just be proactive, whether it's protecting yourself, and even if it's not protection, just making sure everything stays in the family. And we'd love to welcome you to our family. Chris and Stephen have been like family, and their whole group. And again, hi to all the people that I recognized, on the event. I look forward to following up with you like we've done throughout the year, and then meeting anyone new. And if there are people that have some questions today, I did mention to Flo and Jamie that we would be having this event, and they may be available. If not, we can help get something scheduled. And if it's just email, if you just have questions, feel free to send us an email, whatever's best for you guys in this early, journey into your career. But I would, at the same time, stay hungry, stay motivated, don't delay, don't put things off. It's very easy to put things off. The next thing you know, a year later, you're at the same event and you're like, oh shoot, I just missed out on my 5-year, window for my policy, or just different things that you're doing. So, but as always, Chris, I really appreciate it. Is there anything else that I need to go over, sir?
No, just schedule a call if we missed your questions, guys. We got to wrap here. We're really already over about 20 minutes here. I guess the last question, Chris, I don't know if you want to just have fun with this, but how does an IUL fit into all of this?
It fits just fine. Like if you got an IUL and you're trying to protect it, trying to determine, what happens with the death benefit should you pass away, then the trust structure will absolutely allow that. You could have the policy paid to the trust. You could have the policy own the trust if you're looking to protect it from, like true asset protection, which most policies, whole life or IULs, are protected against judgments and liens in most states. But if you wanted to double down on that protection, or you were doing estate planning and you didn't want the proceeds to be included into your estate, then you'd use like an ILIT, which is an irrevocable life insurance trust. A lot of different strategies, whether it's IUL, term, whole life, any permanent life insurance policy. Definitely you want to do some of that kind of planning. That's probably the nicest I've ever been when you said the word IUL.
You're tired.
I'm very tired. I'm very tired.
All right, man. Well, that was really good, Brent. By far, you're always the champion of questions and answers, and that did not let us down today. That was very, very, very good.
Yeah, well, thanks for teaching me how to share my slide. I'm getting better. And I'll always try to provide some new content, for Chris and for the group, because I know we have a very loyal following. And I got to, I'm going to miss a couple, but Tess, Lisa, hi. Obviously you guys are on a lot of events, but I want to provide something new for you guys each time moving forward. And then obviously educate the audience with some of the standard stuff. So thank you for your time as well and this opportunity. And you guys have a great week. And hey, go Cougars. Hopefully we could do something. Who knew BYU had a basketball team? So
that's awesome.
And then just as we get ready to wrap, one of the things I will say to all of you is like I mentioned earlier, the Legacy Builder course. We are going to email this to every single one of you that registered for this webinar, whether you're on here or not. There's still 166 of you on, so you will get an email of the Legacy Builder course. The bundle, which you've been seeing me post in the chat for $197, gives you the course, like the actual course. The Legacy Builder course is an entire course. What we're giving you in an email is just the PDF, okay, which is very helpful, but the course is even better. Plus, with the bundle, you get all the recordings of every week of March Money Madness. You get my books, every one of my books, and you're also going to get access, which I think is the best part of it, access to MSTV for 1 full year. So for the bundle being $197, literally you would spend that just on a membership to MSTV for the year. So you're getting all that other stuff completely free as the bundle. We're going to be running this bundle pricing until April 1st. So people were asking, how long is that price good for? Till April 1st. But why delay the inevitable? Just get the course, just buy the bundle and get started today. So with that being said, folks, thank you so very much. Sorry we went a little over. The questions were awesome. If we missed your question, book a call with Brent, and we will see you on the next webinar, which starts at 4:30 this afternoon. Ask me anything. And I'm going to skip the happy hour today. But with that being said, we'll see everybody soon. Brent, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. We're putting up tons of them, but I think if you like this one, you'll probably like that video as well. Not only that, I've got a book that I created, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery, where we actually show you what the wealthy do in the game they play with money. I want you to have that for free. And if you want to know about all my new videos coming up, click that alert button. Actually, smash that alert button, and you'll be notified every time we put a new video. So we'll see you on the next episode.